Maxon recently announced the April release of Cinema 4D. So it's 2024.4 is the edition. With that release, they've made some exciting announcements about the particle system. So you've probably seen some of the videos that are out there, some of the previews. The particle system has gotten a robust update, and it's pretty darn cool. I am an XParticles user. I use XParticles in almost every project I work with. But I'm really excited now to see sort of how their particle system compares. And I'm excited about the fact that they've built in so many features, and it's going to continue to grow, I'm sure. So rather than just spend time talking about their particle system, I thought I'd actually try to make something for you. And something caught my eye in their preview. So we're here on a Cinema 4D website on maxon.net. And if you can watch the preview to show all of the new features. But if you scroll down to what's new and watch this little video, I'll turn the sound off here. There was one particular thing that kind of caught my eye that I wanted to focus on today, and that is growing mold. So I'm going to go ahead and come out here a little bit further and take a look here. So this next piece is pretty fantastic, right? It's a really short clip. So I'm going to go ahead and let it play and then rewind and step through it a little bit more slowly. So I was really excited to see this. This piece by Scott Frizzle is showing kind of mold growing on an orange. So today I thought I would try to reproduce at least portions of this using the new particle system. So let's take a look and see what we can do. Rather than use an orange, I thought today I'm going to use an onion, just so it looks a little bit different. And in the models section of Cinema 4D under food, we've got apples and ketchup and onions. And so I'm going to use this cut onion. I think the white onion will do us the best. So I'm going to go ahead and take this white onion and add it into my scene. Now, the first thing I want to do before I continue on is work out my scale, because the simulation in Cinema 4D is really dependent on scale. It works kind of more realistically with scale being appropriate. And so I want to go ahead and create a model of a figure. And I'm going to take the onion and I'm going to scale it up so that it looks like a reasonably sized onion for this figure, right? So let's just go ahead and scale it. It's a big onion, okay? So we're going to say this is a large onion and it's cut in half. And now I can get rid of my figure. And I've got an onion that is scaled reasonably. The next thing I want to do is make sure I have enough polygons to work with. So if I hit NB, you can see that it's nice. It's a good model, well designed, but it could use some more polygonal structure. Part of the thing that we're going to do with the mold growth is going to be reliant on the actual polygons, right? So it's going to grow on each polygon. So we need to have something that's pretty dense for it to work appropriately. And so this is set up already so that it's in the subdivision surface. So all I really have to do is increase the number of subdivisions in the renderer and editor. And I'm going to do it to 3 in both cases and go ahead and hit C on my keyboard. And that's going to make this an editable model now. And we should be good to go from that point. So I'll hit NA now so we can see our model again. And I'll just go ahead and add these roots in as a child of onion, cut and drag it down. So I'm only working with this. And that way I can get rid of all these other components. So I just have a model to work with. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and set up my particle system. So let's just take a quick look at what we've got though before we dive in. So the lovely people at Maxon have given us some example scenes. So if you come out to all here and look at example scenes and scroll down to features, you'll see a particles section. And in here, you can scroll through and see all of the example scenes that they've set up, which give you different kind of particle simulation settings, right? So you got abstract flames and you've got arrows coming in and sort of curly noise and branching and things breaking and shattering and bugs and populations and surface crawling and, you know, dissolving models and logo things. So glittery dust, logo dissolves. So lots of wonderful examples to work with, but I didn't see anything like the mold growth that I was looking for. So I felt like I was kind of on my own. So let's see what we can do. But great starting point. Also, they've given you a great help feature. So if you come into the help menu and just type in particles, you're going to find intro to particle simulation. And this page gives you a really in-depth overview of how the particle simulation system works, gives you example scenes that you can work with, and kind of gives you step-by-step hand-holding on how to work with this new system. So I recommend you dive in and take a look there. I haven't gotten into a lot of it. I just kind of wanted to work through one project and see how I felt about it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new system. Now I've got that particle simulation system docked over here. So it comes in right here under simulate. You can undock that menu and just like pull it over here and attach it. And now I have all of the new particles information and the old particle information available to me. I want to start with an emitter. Now, they have the basic emitter like they've always had, right? And you might notice something new here. So this is the basic emitter. It takes a second to play once you add an emitter for some reason. I guess the system's a little bit more complicated. So this looks like our old particle, like basic particle emitter that we had before. But you might notice it came in with this particle group. So that's something that's new with this system. Every single emitter that you create comes with a particle group. So the emitter controls things you might expect, like how many things it's creating, how big it is, what type of shape it is. You can do shot, constant, pulses. You can change the seed, random seed. You can come into the properties, change the lifetime. You can reassign the group to a different one. You can change the speed, the directionality, alignment, color, radius, all these kinds of things exist in the properties section. And then the particle group controls things like how does it look? So these are the dots that it's creating right now. We can draw the radius of those dots so it's more circular. It's actually showing us the size of the particle. Or you could change it to arrows, ticks, lines, or handles. And then you can change the actual size as well. So I can change these up to something like 5, right? So now they're much larger. The dots are going to be larger. The arrows are going to be larger. So this is all to help you with visualization. And actually, what would happen if we rendered these right now? So this is something that's nice. The particles are set up to render by default in Redshift without doing anything, right? So if I start my IPR now, I'm going to get particles, which is something that I've never seen before. You always have to do something to get the particles to render. So this is kind of a nice feature. You can visualize your simulations right away. Now, the actual size of the particles, you might notice, is not the same as what the draw feature is telling me. The actual size of the particles is controlled by this radius feature. So they are 1 centimeter. If I change these to 0.5 and create new particles, the new ones are going to be 0.5 centimeters. So just keep in mind that there is a difference between the visualization feature in the particle group and the actual radius in the particle emitter. The particle group also contains information about the cache. So once you've done your particle simulation, you can cache the entire simulation. So nice feature as well. Okay, so I'm going to delete this particle group and this particle emitter. And what I want to do is use one of these other emitters. So this is new, right? So before all we had is an emitter. Now we have a mesh emitter, we've got a spline emitter, and the reproduce emitter. Mesh emitter, self-explanatory, right? It emits particles from a mesh object. Spline emits particles from a spline. Reproduce actually emits particles. It's kind of like the MoGraph of particle emitters, so it duplicates what other emitters are doing. So that one's one I'm excited to dive into and learn more about. But for this project right now, we're going to use a mesh emitter, and that mesh emitter's got its own particle group. I'm going to call this onion emitter, and I'm going to call this onion group. And that way I know exactly what's going on. And if I had multiple emitters in my scene, it would be pretty clear. So what I want to do is tell this onion emitter to emit particles on this onion. And so in the onion emitter, under emission, for geometry, I want to include onion cut. And now that I've done that, my onion emitter is I'll turn off my rendering, is emitting particles directly from the surface of my onion. If I increase the rate to something like 1,000, you'll see that it's emitting lots of particles. If I come into the particle properties and turn the speed down to something like 1, you'll see that it's just continuously emitting particles from the surface of this onion. So pretty fantastic. I'm actually going to turn my speed down to 0 so that the particles just kind of sit there on the surface. And I'll go ahead and leave it right there for now. I am going to increase the size of the draw of my dots and show the radius. So you can see the radius in comparison to my onion is pretty huge. And so I want to come into my emitter under radius, and I'm going to change this down to something like 0.1. Right, so now we have smaller particles being produced on that surface. And we're going to go even smaller in a moment. But for now, this will be just fine. This radius value actually gives you variance as well. So I could do 0.1 and I can vary that radius by a percentage, or not a percentage, but by a measurement. So if I did 0.05, we're going to have bigger and smaller ones that are a 0.05 difference from 0.1. So now if I were to do a IPR render here, you're going to notice that those particles that it's created are indeed represented by that circular outline size that we saw. So good start. We've got particles, doesn't look like mold yet. How do we control the mold starting in a point and then growing over a surface and having a little bit of variability like we saw in the orange here? Well, this is how I would go about it. We're going to use a series of vertex colors and vertex color maps to control where the particles are being placed on the onion. And so the first thing I need is to go into tags, and I'm going to go to other tags and create vertex color. We'll drag that over here to the end. And I don't need to do anything with that at all. I just need to leave it there. And then I'm going to say, let's go ahead and turn off our IPR. Now I'm going to go up to tags, other tags, and create a vertex map. This vertex map will control where particles will be placed. And so I'm going to go ahead and drag that one over here, and I'm going to rename this to vertex map. We'll call this one vertex map A. And in this vertex map, I want to change this to use transfer. And that is immediately going to bring us into our fields section. It comes in with freeze on here. I'm just going to delete that. And what I want to do is add in a circular field. And I'm sorry, a spherical field. And now this spherical field is going to be controlling where yellow is going to be where our particles are going to be the largest. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this down, make it smaller. I'm going to make a decision about where I want this mold to begin growing. I think we'll start like right here on this corner. And so what I want to do is place this right there on that corner and make it pretty small and move it over something like that. So essentially the size of this spherical field is going to control where our mold is going to be. So as it grows over time, as we animate the size of it, our mold is going to grow. All right, so I also want to add a little bit of variability in there, so some randomness or some noise. And to do that, I'm going to add a shader field. So if you go into the fields here and type in, add in a shader field, that'll add that into our group. And under the shader field, I'm going to come down, choose a noise for my shader, and we'll play around with the type of noise and the scale of that noise. Let's do something like blistered turbulence. And let's turn down the scale. So I love how you can sort of see this real time. I'm also going to come in and change some of the clipping, right? So I want to kind of make it a little bit more contrasty. So I'm just bringing the low clip and the high clip a little closer together. So we have some sort of dead spots. So red is where it won't happen, and yellow is where it will happen. And I feel like this feels like an organic shape. You can always come in and play with your scale at any time. I felt like right there was pretty nice. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. And what I'll do is go back up to my fields in my vertex map. And I'm going to change this one to overlay. And what that does is, as I scale this up, you're going to see that the edges are showing me that sort of more organic appearance where things are growing and not growing, right? So this mold's going to grow out over time, and we'll have a little bit of that sort of more organic feel. Just moving this up a little bit to this corner. Kind of want them to start at a spot that's really small. So while we've got this in place and it's working, we've got our fields working. Let's go ahead and animate this. So let's give ourselves like, I don't know, 300 frames or something. And I'll start off really small. So let's look at the spherical field and we'll say 0. And then over time, let's say over 200 frames, I'm going to grow it so I can just scale it up right here. And go ahead and keyframe that. Okay, so our particles are still being made. They're not listening to us yet, but you can see how that mold growth is going to feel. So that's pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with the way that feels. What I also want to have happen is I don't want the center to remain there, right? So if I'm going to produce particles on a surface and the particles are going to produce everywhere this is yellow, and they're going to continually produce, right? So it's going to keep producing particles. I don't want particles grow on top of particles on top of particles. What I want to have happen is a, a radius appear and then disappear. So the particles are produced and they grow out and it produces more on the outside and then it disappears at the end. So that's kind of what I'm going for right now. And to do that, I want to add a remap, right? So I'm going to actually add a new vertex map on here. I'm going to select my onion, go to other tags, and say vertex map. We'll put it over here at the end. We'll call this vertex map B. You can call it whatever you want, of course. And in this vertex map, I'll say use transfer again. I'll delete the freeze again, and I'm going to drag in my vertex map A. So vertex map A is copied in here. It looks exactly like it has before. But what I'm going to do differently now is I'm going to go ahead and come up later in my timeline so that I see more of a larger radius. And here I'm going to add in, under clamp here, we're going to add in a remap. And this remap function is going to allow us to control, using a spline, how this is functioning. So contour mode, I'm going to change to curve. And then this is the curve that it's using right now. What I want to do is grab this, pull it down, control click in the center, and bring in another curve, right? So this is creating this nice radius. So what's going to happen now is as we come in, it's going to start with this radius being pretty, with this area being a ring, and it's going to grow this ring out as we go. And then we should be able to control the fading out at the end by animating this multiplier component. So it's pretty simple to use. So this is what we've got right now. We've got this ring that grows out particles, and the particles get bigger and bigger and bigger, or the area grows and grows and grows. As soon as this hits 200, I'm going to quickly fade it away. So at 200, I'm going to come back into this vertex map, and in the remap section down at the bottom, I'm going to animate this multiplier. And over, let's say, maybe 40 frames or so, we're going to go ahead and just animate this down to 0. And let's see how that looks now. So nice. I think that's looking really cool. We may want to change some things in a moment, but we'll see how it goes. Let's get this working further. So I still don't have any way right now to tell the onion emitter to emit along those areas, right? So in my emitter, I do have this option to add in a restriction, right? So this is where we're going to add in a polygon tag, selection tag. So what I want to do is come into my object, just click on any of it, hit Control A, select all of them. I'm going to say select, store selection, and we'll call this polygon selection, we'll call this mold growth area. And I want to click on use transfer. And it's set up automatically to use fields and everything. And what I want to do is, in its section down here for transfer, I want to delete freeze, and I want to add in my second vertex map B. And now vertex map B is going to be a selection map that's controlled by the vertex colors that we just created. And so now what happens is in my onion emitter, I'm going to drag in this selection tag. And if all has gone well, what we should see is particles beginning to emit here and then emitting in a wave over time and then no longer emitting. And that's exactly what's happening, right? So we've got a great first step, right? So we've got our particles emitting where we want them to. If I do like a quick IPR, you can see that those particles are emitting over time. We've got a kind of a concentration in the center of it's growing, and then we've got this outer concentration on the edges, and it's got sort of an organic shape on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and increase my emitter rate to 2000. And so now we've got more particles being emitted at a more rapid rate. And you may have to change that over time. You know, you may have to make it slower, whatever, to make it do what you want it to do. Now that I'm looking at this, I kind of want to have that fadeaway happen at the same time. And so I think I'm going to do a little bit of overlapping in those keyframes. So I'm just popping open my dope sheet really quick. And under this fields remap, let's go ahead and zoom out. I'm just going to have these overlap. So the fields remap is going to overlap at the end there. And so they're going to emit particles and it's going to fade out at that time. So we can see it happening here. It's growing, but it's fading out as it gets to the end. Right. So I kind of like the way that feels a little better. Let's see how that looks when we play it. Excellent. I'm going to increase this to 4,000. I want lots of particles to be being produced. All right, so now it's really growing, tons of particles as it goes along. That's excellent. All right, I'm pretty happy with the way that's working. Yeah, so we've essentially coated this onion entirely by these particles. And so now we need to figure out how can we change the color and all of that over time so that we get the white growth on the areas. Can we change the size over time? Yes, we can. So luckily there are some really nice things built in that allow us to do that. Okay, so let's work on that size change over time. I'll go ahead and pull my dope sheet back down. I'll go ahead and turn off my render settings and let's add in a couple of things. So one thing I want to add in. So the first thing I'm going to do is have my particles grow from a very tiny point to being larger over time, rather than them just appearing, right? Like popping into place as they're grown. I want them to scale. To do that, we can use a data mapper, right? So under the color mapper option here, there are all these different things now. We can have look and spin and blend and flock and predator play things and collisions and pyro advect that works with the pyro system with particles. But we're going to do simple stuff first. We're going to do data mapper. This needs to be a child of the onion group or of the particle group that you want to affect. So any kind of components that you're putting in here to manipulate the particles need to be manipulating that particle emitter's specific group. And so the data mapper comes in right now defaulting on age, and that's what we want to use. I'm going to do something like over a number of frames, go from this size to this size. And so on the age section, I'm going to say from 0 to 100 frames. I want you to go from, and I'm going to change this from position to radius, right? So you've got all these different options in here, distance traversed, lifetime, angular velocity, speed. I'm going to use radius, and I'm going to say over the time, I want you to go from 0.1 on the, well, I think our particle size right now is what, 0.1? So our particle properties radius is 0.1. So let's say 0.01 to 0.1 is going to be our dimensions. So we're going to say 0.01 to 0.1. That'll be our radius change. And right now, it's not going to work exactly the way we want it to because we've got this bell curve in here. So what I really want to do is kind of delete this end of the bell curve and just pull this top one over and hold down shift. So I want this to ease in and out over time. So you can think of this bottom left one as 0, and it is, and this top right one is 0.1. Or this bottom left one is actually 0.01, and this top right one is 0.1. Let's see if that's working. And we'll zoom in. And it is, right? So now that we've set that up, you can see the particles that are being created on the outside edge first are smaller than the particles being created that have been created earlier. So over time right now, these particles are starting off at little pinhead tiny points, and they're growing. And this is something that was much harder to do with the previous system. So that already feels pretty organic. And let's go ahead and back this up and render a little bit just this segment and see what it looks like. So nice. You can see, and you can see how quickly this stuff is processing, right? So using the GPU, it is calculating all these particles so quickly. It's really nice. So we've got this mold system kind of growing out from the edge. I think I'm liking the way this feels. Yeah, I am. I think I'm liking the way this feels. So we're going to go ahead and keep it that way. So that's one thing. Next thing we want to do is kind of change that color, right? So I'm going to add another mapper, and this time we actually are going to use the color mapper. And the color mapper also needs to be a child of the onion group, of the particle group you're working with. And we're going to use age to control the color. And over time, I want to go from, let's just say the same number of frames, 100. We want to go from 0, which is the left, to 100, which is the right. If I don't change anything right now, our particles are going to go from red to blue over 100 frames as they're grown. And so I'm playing through a little bit. So you can see that they're starting off red in the center. Let's go ahead and turn off the IPR so we can see it growing. So they're red in the center and they're turning to blue on the edge, right? So if I want to get that green, white to green sort of feel, all I have to do is change my colors, and it's kind of like a grayish, nasty blue-green, right? So almost like a sickly teal gray. That looks pretty good. And you can decide using the knot how quickly you want it to do that. And let's see how that feels. So pretty great. We've got our particles growing. And that is looking already a lot like mold. I think I'm going to make a choice here, and I'm going to say do not be so small at the start. So I'm going to come back into the data mapper and I'm going to have it kind of quickly get up here. So I'm actually going to just pull this over so that they do start off small, but they quickly grow. And let's see how that feels, if it makes a difference. So if you have your IPR on, it just doesn't go very fast, right? But here we go. So now we've got this growth happening at a much faster rate, so that even though we're starting small and they're fading in, it feels a lot more organic. So let's just play through one time and see what we've got without any IPR getting in the way. So this is coming out, and over time, the whole thing turns to green. That's pretty cool. So here is a preview of that. I think I just want to lighten up the teal color at the end so it's a little brighter. And I feel like it's not really producing enough towards these outer edges. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and increase the count. And what I might do is increase the count over time. And so we start off uh, with an emission rate of, let's say, 4,000 at the beginning. So let's say 4,000 at the beginning. But by the time we get to 200, I want it to be producing like 10,000. And I think that'll help us fill in some of those spots where so it feels a little bit more solid as we go out. Yeah, so that's feeling a lot better. Uh, you'll just have to, I'm actually going to double this so it's 20. Yeah, that's looking much nicer. And the last thing I want to talk about is just how can you control the actual material, right? So that it's producing um, the color as a material. And so let's talk about that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my materials, and I'm going to create a new material. And this is going to be a standard material. This will be our mold. And I'm going to open up the mold in Redshift Editor, and I'm going to create a new um, node. And this node is going to be color user data. We'll create that node. And you'll notice in the settings over here, under attribute name, it says presets. And under presets, there's particles and particle color, or particle color with alpha. So if you have alpha information included, you can use that. I'm just going to select particle color, and I'm going to choose that and put that into my output color. And it's going to look black right now. It's not actually showing me the color. And then I want to take this material and I'm going to apply it to the particle group. All right, so I'll drag that onto the particle group. And if I just play, just to show you that this is actually working a little bit, and do my IPR, you can see that it actually has some reflection now and some highlights happening. So I went ahead and rendered this out, and this is what we have for our final. I added a few lights in the scene so we see this beautiful mold growth over time. Beautiful to me, you may not think so, on this onion model. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick introduction to some of the tools in the new particle system in Cinema 4D 2024.4. Be on the lookout for more videos coming up. If you've enjoyed this video, learned something from it, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in another video.